So, is there a path for the Minnesota Vikings to make the playoffs in 2020? Yes, there is, but it's difficult. Is it possible? Sure, but we don't control our own destiny. So I figured for this video, we'd take a look at the NFC playoff picture after Week 10 and see where we go from here. Now, the Vikings are 4-5. They dug themselves out of an enormous hole, but a lot of work still yet to go. The hard part is still yet to come. There is little margin for error left, especially after Sunday when all the teams that you should have been rooting against to lose to make it easier to get into the playoffs all decided to win. So, where does things stand right now? If the season were to end today, this is your current NFC playoff picture as it is. I guess I could be more in frame. So we have listed here the team, their records, and their next opponents. I figured that would be interesting to see what we've got on the docket for the next week. So, of course, leading the conference with the first and second seeds are the Packers and Saints. They have 7-2 overall records. Cardinals and Eagles are your other division leaders. Cardinals at 6-3, Eagles at 3-5-1. Woof. We got the Bucks with the first wild card at 7-3, and then the Rams and the Seahawks with the last two wild cards at 6-3 apiece. In the hunt, Bears, Vikings, Lions all at 4-5. Bears at 5-5. 49ers also in the hunt. If we're going to be in the discussion, that is the Vikings at 4-5, we do have to include other teams that have records similar to us. Because, still mathematically possible. So, taking a look at the current leaders in the playoffs, this is difficult. So, there's two teams that we can erase right now that we don't need to pay attention to for the rest of the season. That is the Packers, because they lead our division. They're likely going to win it. It would take something catastrophic. It would be a huge collapse, headline-worthy stories all off-season. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they'll be able to take care of business and they'll win this division. The other team that we don't have to pay attention to is the Eagles. There is nobody else that is going to make a push for the playoffs in that division. The NFC East is straight hot garbage. It's going to be the division winner that goes to the playoffs for them and no one else. So really, it's irrelevant what happens in the NFC East for the rest of the season. That turns our focus to the NFC South and the NFC West. And more importantly, I think the NFC West. But we don't control our own destiny in that division. We don't play the NFC West teams this year. So if we're going to go that route, we have to get some help. And luckily, I think that there could be, some kinks in the armor for the Seahawks, if you will, because that defense is just so bad. So the problem is Russell Wilson is just so damn good. Kyler Murray is emerging for the Arizona Cardinals as a likely MVP candidate, especially with that insane last-minute touchdown victory over the Buffalo Bills with DeAndre Hopkins catching the Hail Mary. And then you've got the Rams, who are, reminiscent of their 2018 counterparts. They look the part of the team that took them to the Super Bowl. It's just that Miami game has left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. So we don't match up against any NFC West teams this year, so we don't control our destiny in that aspect. We do match up against the Saints and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers later on in the season. And I spoke at the beginning of the season that I had circled the Saints game as a potential playoff, catalyst or implicator, if you will. And I was worried that it was going to be a revenge game for the Saints. And now that the Vikings are showing signs of life and will need to be next to flawless to claw their way back into the playoff picture, that game looms large on the calendar because I know what kind of person Sean Payton is. The fact that we have eliminated them twice in dramatic fashion the last 4 years out of the playoffs, the Minneapolis Miracle and then the overtime touchdown a year ago. I know he's dying for some payback, and so is everybody else on that team, as Michael Thomas included. So I don't want that game to mean anything because the Saints team is going to be very fired up for that. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they seem to be on a roller coaster of a season right now. 1 week we think they're the greatest team in the world. The next week they get blown out. There's no happy medium. It's one extreme or the other. I still think this team is a very good team. That 7-3 record is, not to be scoffed at. It's not an accident. They just have bad games. And I've always said, two good teams are going to lose games. You go 10-6, that's considered a good season. You lost 6 games. You're going to lose your fair share. There's no problem with that. The thing is, you just don't need to make a habit out of it in order to make the playoffs. So with Tampa Bay, I think that is probably the likeliest sort of control our own destiny, foot in the door playoffs if we could beat them. Now the problem is that game, I believe, I don't remember if it's home or away. You'll have to excuse me. I didn't memorize that. I think the problem is going to be that team is going to be fired up to get into a final playoff spot itself. So that is going to be difficult. Now the Saints game, I don't know how long Drew Brees is going to be out, but that might be a benefit to us if he doesn't play, and instead they have Jameis Winston. Now, I don't cover a lot of Saints stuff, but I have been sort of banging the drum, if you will, for Jameis Winston to take over. I've seen the writing on the wall for Drew Brees. His career is over. They're not winning a Super Bowl with him this year. If they do, it will be in spite of him. They're basically just dragging him along until he retires, and they give him, the proper send off. So that is my opinion on that situation. But I think a Drew Breesless team might be more favorable of a matchup for us compared to what they were a year ago. So that is the landscape. Taking a look at the rest of the Vikings schedule. I sort of talked about this in the video earlier today about the trajectory for the rest of the season, and a lot of people are pointing to the schedule as favorable because you got a lot of home games left against a lot of teams that are pretty bad this year. The next 3 games we go up against teams with combined records of 6-22. So we need to win at least 2 out of 3 of those. We have to think about this in terms of baseball, right? You go into a series of 3 games, you take 2 out of 3, you win the series, you're getting into the playoff hunt. That's what we need to do here. We cannot lose more than 2 more games or we're done. 9-7 is the bare minimum I think that's going to be needed in order to get into the playoffs plus some help. So that is what we're looking at. So we got the Cowboys next week. We got the Panthers the week after that, and the Jaguars the week after that. All 3 of those games, yeah, totally winnable. Absolutely, we can do it. The Bucks. Oh, I guess I did write it down. It's an away game against Tampa Bay. So we got Week 14 at the Buccaneers. That'll be difficult. Week 15 at home against Chicago. That should be easier. I think that defense is going to want a little bit of revenge after we saw Akeem Hicks just running his mouth there late in the game. Week 16 at the Saints. That is the game that has me the most concerned, because I know Sean Payton and company view that as a revenge scenario to kick us out of the playoffs and keep us out, because they'll be having bragging rights about that for months. And then the Lions game might, it's hard to say. Is that game going to be meaningless, or are we going to need the win at that point in order to get in? I think they're going to do whatever they can to win out, because with 5 losses, they've already dug themselves in a tremendous hole. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to win as much as we can. That's the given. There is little room for error. And once we hit that dreaded 7th loss, suddenly every game becomes a must-win, and we're going to have to run the table to have any hope of hoisting a Lombardi this year. I think that, let me be realistic for a second. I think that is out of the realm of possibility, but I'm just sort of demonstrating what the path to that possibility would be. But I think the odds are very low and not in our favor whatsoever. Attainable, yes. It's been done before. Teams have run the table. It can be done, but is it in the cards for Minnesota? I don't think so, because A, Minnesota sports, and B, it's going to be extraordinarily hard. So one other thing is just sort of what we're looking at in terms of next week, who we can be rooting for. Packers, Colts, meaningless. Eagles, Browns, meaningless. Saints and Falcons, that'll be one to keep an eye on. And I think the most important ones are going to be the matchups that are happening in divisions that matter is the Seahawks, Cardinals. We have the Bucks and the Rams facing each other. So really pay attention to these 2 and pay attention to Seahawks and Cardinals. Whoever comes out victorious in those games, the losers are going to be the one that we need to root against for the rest of the season, for them to lose and lose and lose. So that is basically the overview of where we currently stand in the NFC playoff picture and what it's going to take for us to get in. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.